Ever feel like you're just watching life happen?
Yeah.
Convinced that maybe your choices don't really steer the ship. Or maybe you've seen injustice and wondered if fairness is just, well, a lottery.
Yeah, that tension is real.
Let's unpack this, because today on The Deep Dive, we're tackling that very human struggle.
We are indeed. We're diving into Ariel Louis's analysis, The Vindication of the King, Chapter 2.
Okay.
And while this looks at an ancient text, the Book of Samuel, what's really compelling is how it grapples with a timeless question: do our actions matter, or is everything predetermined?
Right.
This chapter specifically explores the tension between believing in fate, what we call fatalism, the idea that all events are inevitable regardless of our choices, and the power of human agency within a framework of divine justice.
Exactly. So our mission today is to cut through this chapter analysis and really pinpoint the core arguments. We'll be focusing on that sharp contrast Louis draws between Hannah's prophetic understanding of God as a force for liberation through choice and the fatalistic mindset that corrupted Eli's priesthood.
A real clash of worldviews.
Think of this as a focused exploration into how this ancient narrative speaks directly to our modern-day questions about free will and, well, how we understand fairness in the world.
And our primary lens for this deep dive is Ariel Louis's insightful analysis of these religious texts.
So where do we begin to unpack this tension?
Well, let's start with Hannah's prayer. Louis argues this isn't just her personal relief talking.
Okay.
It's actually a powerful declaration against fatalism. What's fascinating here is when Hannah proclaims, "My horn is exalted in the Lord." The core insight, according to Louis, is that this signifies her vindicated freedom, her ability to speak truth against this idea that everything is simply, destined to happen.
Oh, it's not just that she's happy?
No, it's more than that. Her voice, her prophetic agency has been liberated.
Right. It's like her newfound joy isn't just about her own happiness, but a testament to the fact that change is possible through divine intervention that actually responds to human experience.
Precisely.
And this directly connects to her next statement. There is none holy as the Lord. What's the key takeaway there?
Well, Louis emphasizes that Hannah's concept of holiness isn't about some distant, uncaring deity. Instead, it's about absolute goodness. And this is a direct challenge to the fatalistic notion that God could somehow be the author of evil just because he's all-knowing.
So she's drawing a line.
A very clear line. Hannah draws a clear distinction. Evil stems from human choices, not from some divine blueprint of destiny.
Which brings us to the rebuke against pride and arrogance. Now, we might just read that as a general warning, don't be boastful. But Louis interprets it more specifically, doesn't he?
He does, precisely. Louis frames it as a direct critique of those who lean into fatalism, almost as a way to excuse their own wrongdoing by implying God is somehow complicit. So the statement that the Lord is a God of knowledge then takes on a crucial meaning. Louis suggests this isn't about God knowing the future and preordaining it, but about him actively weighing and understanding human actions. It shifts the focus from a passive God of fate to an active God of judgment based on our choices.
And I was struck by the contrast Louis draws between a fatalistic view of brokenness and Hannah's perspective. We might hear the bows of the mighty men are broken and think, well, that's just how things go. The powerful eventually fall.
Right.
But how does Hannah reframe that?
Hannah sees it not as some inevitable decline dictated by fate, but as an act of divine justice.
Justice.
Yes. Louis argues she views the broken as being strengthened by God through justice. It's a proactive intervention, not a passive acceptance of what was always going to happen.
Okay.
And this theme of reversal continues, doesn't it? With the images of the full becoming hungry, the hungry being satisfied, and the barren woman bearing 7 children.
So these aren't just random flips of fortune.
Not at all. Louis puts it brilliantly, calls it a divine restructuring of reality by merit, not by destiny.
Merit, not destiny. I like that.
It's about God actively intervening to correct imbalances and reward righteousness, not just following some unchangeable script.
Now, that famous line, "The Lord killeth and maketh alive," that could easily be misinterpreted as a statement of fatalistic power, couldn't it? Like God just decides.
It absolutely could. And that's a critical point where Louis provides important clarification. He argues this isn't about God acting on a whim.
Okay, so what is it then?
Instead, these actions are presented as judgments that align with his justice, responses to human choices as outlined in the law of Moses. It's about consequences tied to our actions, not arbitrary fate.
And this connects with the idea of God raising the poor from the dust to inherit glory.
Yeah.
It's not just about social mobility, is it? There's more going on.
Lewis emphasizes the moral dimension, definitely. The fact that the pillars of the earth are the Lord's signifies a moral foundation to God's involvement in the world. Raising the poor isn't random kindness, it's tied to this underlying sense of justice. Similarly, the statement, "not by strength shall man prevail," isn't about discouraging effort.
But recognizing what truly matters.
Exactly. Recognizing that true victory lies in choosing good, not just relying on brute force or inherent advantages.
And the warning, they that strive with the Lord shall be broken to pieces. It sounds pretty absolute. How does Lewis interpret that in this anti-fatalism context?
Lewis sees it as underscoring God's ultimate authority and justice, rejecting the idea of fate as a co-equal power. It's about the exclusivity of divine power.
So it's not God and fate.
No. The judgment of the earth isn't random or inevitable. It's a manifestation of God's just nature. And finally, Hannah's prophecy looks forward to the strengthening of the king and the anointed one Samuel and then David, their horn, being exalted.
Which brings us full circle.
Right back to the idea of prophetic vindication and the establishment of righteous leadership empowered by God.
Okay, so Hannah lays down this powerful understanding of agency and divine justice. But then the narrative shifts, doesn't it, to Eli's sons, and it's a stark contrast. Lewis describes them as base men who knew not the Lord. What's the root of their disconnect?
According to Lewis's analysis, their lack of knowledge stemmed directly from their belief in fatalism over repentance.
Fatalism over repentance.
Yeah. They saw God as a distant force operating through inevitability, not as a personal God who responds to genuine remorse and, change of heart.
And we see this corruption played out in their actions, like the priest's servant forcibly taking the choicest parts of the sacrifice with that three-pronged fork. It's such a brutal image. How does Lewis connect this to their fatalistic beliefs?
Well, Lewis argues that their belief in fate essentially justified their coercive actions. If everything is predetermined anyway, why not just take what you want?
Ah, right. The ends justify the means.
Sort of. And he highlights that their sin was particularly egregious because they were desecrating the offering itself.
Which was meant to symbolize repentance.
The very concept they seem to disregard. So their actions were a direct reflection of their theology, or lack thereof.
But then we have Samuel, this young boy ministering before the Lord. And Lewis points out the significance of his mother bringing him a new robe each year. What's the symbolism there?
That annual new robe becomes this really potent symbol, Lewis suggests. It represents the continuing victory of the prophetic voice, a direct counterpoint to the stagnant corruption of Eli's sons.
A sign of hope.
Exactly. And the fact that the Lord remembered Hannah, allowing her to have more children, reinforces this idea that God does indeed respond to prayer and accepts repentance. It pushes back against that fatalistic gloom.
Now, Eli himself, he's old. He's aware of his son's terrible behavior, even their abuse of women at the tabernacle entrance. He even rebukes them, but Lewis suggests even his rebuke reveals a fatalistic outlook. How so?
It's in the question he asks them. If a man sin against the Lord, who shall entreat for him? Lewis doesn't present this as righteous anger, really, but rather as an expression of despair and resignation. It implies a belief that certain sins are just unforgivable, that their fate is sealed, and there's no point in seeking repentance.
So he's not saying, change your ways or else.
No. Notice he doesn't urge them to change or threaten consequences. His question suggests he believes their destiny is already fixed. It's profoundly pessimistic.
And because Eli's sons shared this fatalistic view, Lewis argues they just fell into despair. If there's no hope for redemption, why bother changing?
It's a tragic irony, isn't it? Their belief in fate actually contributed to sealing their doom.
Wow. It's a powerful illustration of how our worldview really shapes our actions, our possibilities.
Absolutely. Belief in agency and the possibility of change can be a powerful motivator for good. And interestingly, even amidst this darkness, Samuel continues to grow and find favor, seemingly untouched by the prevailing corruption around him.
And then the man of God arrives. This final warning for Eli. God reminds Eli about revealing himself to his ancestors' house back in Egypt, choosing them for service. What's the significance of this reminder, according to Lewis?
Lewis emphasizes that it highlights the origin of their priesthood in direct revelation and prophecy, not just in hereditary succession or, going through the motions of ritual.
It wasn't just a job they inherited.
Exactly. And the accusation is that Eli has essentially replaced that direct connection, that prophetic voice, with empty ceremony. And worse, he's elevated his own sons over God's will and honor.
And the prophecy that follows the cutting off of Eli's lineage, the rise of a faithful priest who will truly follow God's heart, it underscores the consequences of this fatalistic stagnation, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
Mm.
And Lewis concludes that Eli's fundamental failing wasn't just his negligence in dealing with his sons, though that was bad enough.
It was deeper.
Yes, it was his underlying belief that he was powerless to alter the course of events, that fate had already determined his end. This fatalistic resignation, this belief that change wasn't possible, is why he ultimately offered no real transformative response to the divine warning.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Chapter 2 of the Vindication of the King, we really see this fundamental tension, just as Lewis illuminates it. It's between a worldview shaped by fatalism, this sense of predetermined outcomes, and one grounded in active faith, the power of human choice, and the unwavering justice of the divine.
Yeah, the silence of despair in Eli's house contrasted so sharply with the powerful prophetic voice of Hannah and the hopeful rise of Samuel. It's quite the picture.
And for you, the listener, the core takeaway here is this challenge to the notion of predetermined outcomes. This ancient text, seen through Lewis's analysis, really underscores the significance of your own agency, the possibility of repentance and genuine change, all within the framework of a just God.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? How might these ancient perspectives on fate and free will still be shaping how we understand responsibility, justice, and maybe even our own potential today?
That's the question. Are there modern fatalisms that we might unknowingly subscribe to? Ideas that limit our sense of control or our belief in the possibility of change, maybe in our own lives or in the world around us? And how might embracing a more prophetic voice, one that emphasizes choice and the potential for change, challenge those assumptions? It's definitely something to ponder.